Hello everyone and welcome back to day 2 of the semi-final match of the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge between Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen. Yesterday was a pretty tough day for Hikaru. He lost the match with a result of 3-0, so the fourth game wasn't even played, but now he will get his chance to bounce back. If he wins today, then tomorrow we get a third match. So Hikaru with the white pieces, but before, two very short announcements. Huga made another chess song. It's this time it's about Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, so if you're interested in checking it out, do check it out. It will be the first thing you see in the description below. And also today we have our two tournaments, the Friday Arena and the Meadow Arena, so the links to those tournaments will also be in the description below. Do join, and as usual I'm going to be streaming them and showcasing your games. Now getting back to the game, it's really an interesting game, and it's really remarkable how many interesting games are just coming out of the Berlin defense these days. So yesterday Magnus was able to win a game with the Berlin defense, and he feels very confident playing it today against Hikaru. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. The Ruy Lopez is again on the board. We have knight to f6, Berlin defense, and the d3. We have bishop to c5, everything the same, captures as yesterday. And here Hikaru goes for castles before knight b to d2. And Magnus still just goes for bishop to g4, which is kind of usually not played, as white can immediately tackle that bishop with h3, but this is what Magnus prepared for today. So bishop to h5 and now g4. And we reach the position from the thumbnail where Magnus does not go back with bishop to g6. Instead, he gives it up, gives up the knight for 2 pawns. So knight captures. We have h captures and bishop captures. So here Carlsen gave up a knight for 2 pawns, and also he has a lot of pressure. He has an excellent bishop here. This bishop is pinning the knight, putting pressure on the queen. So we'll see what Hikaru can come up with. So first bishop to e3. He's up a piece, so of course Hikaru wants to further trade pieces, and Magnus declines. Now, there is a game, there are several games actually, where bishop to d6 was played. This position has been reached before. One most notable one is Peter Leko against David Navarra that ended in a draw after bishop to d6. And also Wei Yi had one game against Xiu, where also bishop to d6 was played. But here Magnus goes bishop to e7, and it is a new move. So already as of move 10, we have a completely new game. Now, it's a bit of a different idea than going bishop to d6, since you will have the d file open for your queen, and also there are some other different ideas. So here we have king to h1 by Hikaru. Pretty much the same idea that was used by Navarra, by Peter Leko when Navarra played bishop to d6 against him. But now it kind of is different. Magnus goes f5 immediately. Now the point is, if this is ever captured, then you will have you will have ideas like e4 will be possible, and stuff like that. So rook to g1. This is the idea behind the white's defense. You want to play king h1, rook to g1, and at some point maybe even give up the rook for the bishop here. Since you're already up material, you don't mind giving up the exchange. So Magnus goes h5. Of course, now he doesn't mind capture, since he would also open up the h file for his rook to use for attack, and knight to c3 by Hikaru. Developing, and now f4. Magnus really making it hard for Hikaru to develop his pieces. Bishop back to d2, and now even g5. So at some point Magnus can just capture, for example, on f3, and then continue g4 and push those pawns in front of the king. And here Hikaru's pieces are not ideally placed. The knight cannot move, bishop not doing all that much, rook also, queen not doing much. So here Hikaru goes back, knight to b1, and it is often said that the hardest move to find is with the knight back. So here Hikaru wants to shift the bishop over to this diagonal, and then develop the knight via the d2 square, maybe to c4, put pressure on e5, and so on. And here Magnus can choose between something like bishop to c5, which was played in the game. You can try and developing the queen if you want to castle queenside, or you can go for something like captures, and g4, which is a possibility, but Magnus says this is one of those cases where the threat is stronger than the execution. So he goes bishop to c5, puts pressure on the f2 pawn, and Nakamura pretty much instantly goes bishop to c3, saying, I don't care about this, I have to develop my pieces. So bishop captures on f2 by Magnus, and now, while you could go for the pawn here, let's say bishop captures, Hikaru already has material. What he doesn't have is development. So here by grabbing that pawn on e5, you don't really gain all that much. If rook g2, you can even go bishop to g3, and Magnus will be very happy here. Nakamura still wouldn't have all that much to do with his pieces. So after bishop captures on f2, we have knight beat to d2 by Nakamura, saying grab that rook, I really don't care. And now Magnus again can choose to capture, push g4 and so on, but he still says no, it's still way too early for that, so just queen to e7. He continues development. And Nakamura now goes queen to f1, saying, okay, now you either move the bishop or you capture it, capture my rook. And here Magnus captures, so bishop captures on g1 and queen captures. And now not only did the queen unpin, but also you are preventing black from castling, as the a7 pawn would be hanging. So that's a bit of a problem. If Carlsen can castle queenside, bring the rook, let's say, over here, start pushing those pawns, it should be a win for black. But now Magnus has to decide how to continue. There is no queenside castle because of queen captures this, and the e5 pawn will fall. So here Magnus decides that it's now time to do something. So bishop captures on f3, knight captures, and now of course g4. We have knight captures on e5, and now comes rook to g8. We have rook to f1. Finally, all of Hikaru's pieces are now developed. And now Magnus again has to decide what to do. Still, castling is off limits because this pawn falls. If you play f3, then just the knight captures it, or even the rook. You will not be able to recapture because of queen captures rook here. So queen to g5. Now making f3 a possibility. Also, you put some pressure on the knight. But Hikaru immediately goes in for a counter attack with queen to d4. Now the threat, of course, is queen d7 check, followed by queen to f7 checkmate. And Magnus has to find a way how to prevent this. He goes queen to h4 with check. Hikaru says, okay, king to g1, I don't really have much to do here. And now queen to g3 with check. And now Magnus has to decide how to go about this, whether he wants a perpetual here and take a draw, or he wants to perhaps try something else. So here Hikaru repeats king h1, and Magnus repeats queen to h3. An interesting idea, if it's possible, is rook to d8. You kick away the white queen, and then maybe you will have some attacking chances, just so you stop queen d7 followed by queen to f7 checkmate. So rook to d8 is an idea, but Magnus just repeats queen to h3 check, king to g1, and now again you could go for some like rook to d8, but Magnus now instead of this goes g3. G3 with the idea that he wants to checkmate Nakamura with queen to h2, but also he guards the d7 square with the queen. There is no queen to d7 check now. So Hikaru has to go back. Knight to f3, guarding the h2 square, so there is no checkmate. And now Magnus goes for g2, threatening the rook. Also queen to h1 will now be an idea, and Hikaru just plays rook to e1. And here Magnus has to decide what to do, and it's not an easy decision to make. He's very low on time. He has some 30 seconds on the clock, where Hikaru has, I believe, over 8 minutes. And here, if you go for something like queen to h1, king f2, and you don't have a good continuation here, whatever you play just doesn't work. Sorry about that. Give me a second. Whoa, sorry about that. It was some delivery I was waiting for. So after this king to f2 move, like I said, you don't really have a good continuation here, and well, you still have to deal with queen to e5 check, followed by all sorts of check that follow, which you don't really know if you'll be able to handle. So after rook to e1, Magnus decides for queen captures on f3. But now it's Hikaru's move, and he definitely makes it count. Queen to e5 with check. So what do you play here? Well, there are really no good moves. Magnus went king to d8, but now queen to f6 with check. And here you have to go back. If you go king to c8, then queen e6 check just picks up the rook, so that's no good. So Magnus went king to e8, but now well, there are a lot of different ways for you to win this game, but one is particularly interesting, so feel free to pause the video and try to find this idea while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding either of the moves, either queen to e6 check, which connects with the rook, followed by bishop to b4 if the king goes, of course, to f8 to defend the rook, or the move Nakamura played in the game, which is bishop to b4 right away. A slow move, but a deadly one, threatening queen to e7 checkmate, and now you don't really have a good defense here. Magnus played c5 to maybe make some room for the king, but bishop captures on c5. The threat still remains. We have king to d7 by Magnus, but here Nakamura just played queen to f7 check, and it was in this position on move 33 that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game, and Nakamura wins game 1 of their second semifinal match, and he's on a good path to winning the match and forcing a third match. So here you resign. Because whatever you do, let's say you go king to d8, doesn't really help, you just lose the rook. So once you go back, you're still gonna get checkmated. Queen to d5 check, you're gonna get king e8, queen e6 check, let's say king d8, now comes queen e7 check here, and this will be checkmate. Or if you try and go down the board, let's say king to c6, then it's queen to d5 with check, king b5, and now a lot of different moves win here, but also a4 is just perfectly winning. Let's say captures, now we're going to go queen c4 check, king here, and the rook to a1 will now deliver checkmate. So really wild game, and it's just incredible how every game when the Berlin is played, such such beautiful stuff can happen. So I really don't mind. It's not like in the old days before, Alpha Zero and Lila Chess Zero, when they played the Berlin, it was like super boring. But now every game where the Berlin is played, it's like super interesting. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, do check out Huga's song, the first link in the description below, and do join the tournaments, second and third link in the description below. I would also like to thank Newcase, Patrick Gilger, Ben Fabian, Adam Decker, and Nahum Fellman for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.